Yo guys, it's your friend here, bringing you another awesome Naruto what if tale. So today we are going to see what if Naruto found a letter from Kushina that changed everything. Letter to become true prodigy. Subscribe if you enjoyed the video and also check the description. So, let's begin the story. The last golden rays of sunlight stretched across Koha alike, tired fingers casting long shadows between the village buildings. 7-year-old Naruto Uzumaki trudged along the dusty street, his shoulders hunched beneath his oversized white t-shirt with a red spiral emblem. His bright blue eyes, usually dancing with mischief, had dulled to a flat cobalt, his steps heavy with the weight of another day's disappointments. The academy's doors had long since closed behind him, but the whispers followed him home like persistent ghosts. Don't partner with him. My parents said to stay away. He can't even make a proper transformation jutsu. A rock skittered across the path as Naruto kicked it, watching it bounce down an alley. He didn't understand why the village looked through him as if he were made of glass. Why even Sensei's patience seemed to wear thin whenever he raised his hand. Why, no matter how loud he shouted or how brightly he dressed, he remained invisible. I'll show them, Naruto muttered, clenching small fists at his sides. Someday I'll be the greatest Hokage ever, and then they'll have to see me. The declaration rang hollow in the empty street. Even to his own ears, the words sounded like a broken record, scratched and worn from too many repetitions. The stairs to his apartment creaked beneath his weight. 3 flights up, second door on the left, a place that was supposed to be home, but had never quite managed to feel like one. The lock clicked open at the turn of his key, and Naruto stepped into the silent darkness of his tiny apartment. No welcome home, no dinner cooking, no one waiting, just emptiness. Naruto flicked on the light switch, illuminating a space that could generously be described as lived in. Instant ramen cups created a miniature skyline on his kitchen counter. A mountain of clothes, both clean and questionable, dominated one corner of the room. His unmade bed sat beneath a window that offered the apartment's only redeeming quality: a partial view of the Hokage monument. Guess I should clean up a bit, he said to no one, his voice swallowed by the walls. The third Hokage would be visiting for his monthly check-in soon. While the old man never complained about the mess, Nar had noticed the slight downturn of his mouth when he thought Nar wasn't looking. Small disappointments from the only person who seemed to care even a little bit cut deeper than outright rejection. With an exaggerated sigh worthy of someone being sentenced to hard labor, Nar began gathering empty cups and stray kunai practice targets. He sorted through piles of clothing, sniffing items suspiciously before determining their fate. Laundry basket or drawer. The floor gradually emerged from beneath the debris, revealing scuffed wooden planks that had seen better decades. As he shoved his bed aside to sweep underneath, a peculiar hollow sound echoed through the room. Naruto froze. He tapped his foot against the spot again. Thunk. Different from the solid thud of the surrounding floorboards. Curiosity ignited like a paper bomb. Nar dropped to his knees, fingers tracing the edges of what appeared to be an ordinary plank. To the untrained eye, it looked identical to its neighbors, worn, slightly warped from age and moisture. But there, almost invisible unless you were searching for it, a hairline separation ever so slightly wider than the others. What the? Naruto whispered, excitement building in his chest. Like a coiling spring, hidden compartments meant hidden treasures. At least, according to the adventure stories he managed to read when the librarian wasn't chewing him away. Maybe someone had left behind valuables or forbidden scrolls containing awesome jutsu. Or Naruto's stomach growled. Hopefully a coupon for lifetime free ramen at Oricus. His fingernails scraped against the groove. Finding no purchase, Nar scrambled to his feet, rummaging through his meager possessions until his hand closed around the dull kunai he'd rescued from the academy's discard pile. He wedged the tip into the crack and applied pressure. Nothing happened. Frowning, Naruto repositioned the blade and tried again, adding more force. The metal bent slightly under the pressure. Come on, he grunted, pushing harder. The floorboard popped up with a sudden crack, sending Nar tumbling backward. He landed with an ungraceful thump. The kunai clattering across the floor. Rubbing his sore elbow, Nar crawled forward eagerly to inspect his discovery. Beneath the floorboard lay a small dust-covered compartment. Disappointment initially flashed across his features. No mountain of treasure or ancient weapons. Instead, a single scroll sat nestled in the darkness, wrapped in faded red fabric. Just an old scroll, Naruto mumbled, reaching in to retrieve it. His fingers brushed against the object. And something extraordinary happened. A surge of warmth traveled up his arm like a gentle current, and the scroll emitted a soft golden glow that pulsed once, twice, then faded back to dormancy. The sensation left Nar breathless, his heart hammering against his rib cage. Whoa! He exclaimed, jerking his hand back. Did anyone else see that? He glanced around his empty apartment before remembering he was alone. Right. Curiosity overcoming caution, Nar reached for the scroll again. This time, no light show greeted him, but the same inexplicable warmth remained, like the scroll recognized him somehow. With reverent hands, he lifted it from its hiding place. The fabric wrapping was a deep crimson, faded with age, but still vibrant. As Naruto unfolded the outer covering, he noticed an embroidered spiral pattern, identical to the one he wore on his shirts and saw emblazoned throughout Konoha. The third had once told him it was a symbol of friendship with a long-lost ally, but never elaborated further. Why would something with this symbol be hidden under my floor? Nar wondered aloud. The scroll itself appeared ordinary at first glance. Aged yellowish paper rolled around a wooden core secured with a simple red string. But as Naruto examined it more closely, he noticed tiny characters inscribed along the binding, so small they were barely visible. Complex patterns that reminded him of the security seals he'd seen on the Academy's supply room, only far more intricate. Nar hesitated. He'd gotten in trouble before for touching things that didn't belong to him. But this was in his apartment under his floor. Technically, that made it his, right? With that impeccable 7-year-old logic, Nar tugged at the string. It resisted for a moment, then unraveled with surprising ease. The scroll loosened in his hands, practically unrolling itself as if eager to reveal its contents. Inside, elegant handwriting flowed across the paper like water. Neat, precise characters written with purpose. Naruto's reading skills weren't the best. Paying attention in class had never been his strong suit, but he could make out enough to understand this was a letter. The first line stole the breath from his lungs. To my beloved son, Nar. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Naruto's hands trembled so violently that the edges of the scroll quivered like leaves. In a storm, he had to set it down on the floor, smoothing it flat with shaking palms as he struggled to process those 5 simple words. To my beloved son Naruto. Someone had written to him. Someone who knew his name. Someone who called him beloved. Someone who might be his mom. The word felt foreign on his tongue. A concept so abstract he never dared voice it aloud before. Heart thundering in his ears, Naruto forced himself to focus on the next lines. If you're reading this, it means several things have happened. First, the chakra recognition seal I placed on this scroll has activated, confirming you are indeed my son. Second, you're old enough for the time release jutsu to have dissolved, allowing you to find this hidden compartment. And third, this is the hardest part to write. It means I am no longer with you. My name is Kusha Uzumaki. I am your mother. Tears blurred Naruto's vision, splashing onto the paper. He wiped them away, frantically, terrified of damaging this precious link to a parent he never known existed. Until this moment, He blinked rapidly, forcing himself to continue reading through the watery veil. I wish more than anything that I could be there watching you grow up, teaching you the Uzumaki ways, protecting you from a world that can be both wonderful and cruel. Since I cannot be there in person, I've left you these scrolls. Pieces of your heritage and my love scattered throughout Koha like breadcrumbs, leading you home. There is so much I want to tell you, but some knowledge is dangerous until you're ready to bear it. The third Hokage has promised to look after you, though even he doesn't know about these scrolls. This was my own secret project during my pregnancy. My insurance policy to make sure part of me would reach you even if the worst happened. Naruto's mind reeled. The old man had known his mother, had known her well enough for her to extract promises about Naruto's care. Why had he never mentioned her? Never even told Naruto her name. Confusion swirled into anger, then back to desperate curiosity as he read on. The Uzumaki clan was once renowned throughout the shinobi world for three things: our extraordinary life force and chakra reserves, our mastery of Hujutsu, sealing techniques, and our distinctive red hair. Based on the seal's recognition, you've inherited our chakra at the very least. My little maelstrom, you likely have more chakra in your small finger than most shinobi have in their entire bodies. This is both a blessing and a challenge. Having enormous chakra reserves makes control difficult. I suspect your academy instructors may misinterpret this as lack of talent or concentration. They would be wrong. Naruto's jaw dropped. Was that why his clones always looked like deflated versions of himself, no matter how hard he tried? Not because he was stupid or talentless as the instructors implied, but because he had too much chakra. The revelation hit like a thunderclap. What if he wasn't a failure? What if he just needed different training? Training specific to whatever an Uzumaki was. I've included basic chakra exercises designed specifically for our clan in this scroll. Master these before attempting the standard academy techniques. The difference will astonish your teachers. When you're ready for the next scroll, look for where the leaves dance in stone. Trust your instincts. Use Uzumaki. Intuition rarely leads astray. Know this above all else. I love you with every fiber of my being. Nar. Whatever happened that prevented me from raising you, my love remains eternal. You are the greatest gift I ever received and my proudest legacy. With all my heart, your mother, Kusha Uzumaki. P.S. I hope you inherited your father's coloring, rather than becoming a tomato head like your mother. But either way, you are perfect. Below the signature, several diagrams illustrated the promised chakra exercises with detailed instructions written alongside each image. Nar read the letter again and a fourth time. Each reading revealed new details, new questions, new promises. His fingers traced the characters of his mother's name as if he could somehow absorb her presence through the ink she had once touched. Kusha Uzumaki, his mother, who had loved him, who had prepared for the possibility of her absence by creating this elaborate treasure hunt of knowledge, who had red hair and called herself a tomato head, who thought he was perfect. Nar glanced up at his reflection in the small cracked mirror hanging on his wall. Sunshine yellow hair, sky blue eyes, whisker marks on his cheeks that had always set him apart from others. No trace of red anywhere. He must have gotten his father's coloring as she'd hoped. His father. Another revelation. Another person who had existed, who had a name somewhere, who had contributed to Naruto's existence. The emptiness of the apartment suddenly seemed less absolute. The silence less suffocating. For the first time in his memory, Naruto felt anchored to something larger than himself. A family, a clan, a heritage. The knowledge wrapped around him like a blanket, warm and secure. With careful reverence, Naruto set the letter aside and examined the chakra exercises his mother had left for him. The diagram showed a series of hand positions and breathing patterns along with Notes about chakra circulation that made much more sense than I-sensei's technical explanations. Begin by feeling the chakra pool in your center. For most shinobi, this feels like a small pond. For an Uzumaki, it's more like an ocean. Don't try to control all of it at once. Instead, imagine dipping a cup into that ocean. Work with just that cup full until control becomes second nature. Naruto settled into a cross-legged position on the floor. Closing his eyes as the instructions suggested, he placed his hands in the first seal position and focused inward. At first, nothing happened. His thoughts kept drifting to the letter, to his mother, to the countless questions bubbling inside him. Each time, he forced his attention back to his breathing, to the sensation of energy within his core. Then gradually he felt it. A vast swirling vortex of power so immense it took his breath away. The diagrams hadn't exaggerated. His chakra wasn't a pond but an entire ocean, violent and untamed. No wonder. His jutsu attempts always overloaded. It was like trying to fill a teacup from a tsunami. Following Kushina's instructions, Nar imagined scooping up just a small portion of this energy, containing it in a manageable form. Even that cupful felt substantial in his mental grasp. He directed it through the pathways illustrated in the scroll, visualizing the flow as a small stream rather than allowing the entire dam to burst. A tingling sensation spread from his center outward, following the exact circulation pattern Kushina had described. Unlike his previous attempts at chakra manipulation, which always felt like wrestling an angry cat, this exercise created a sense of harmony, as if his chakra recognized and respected the Uzumaki methods. Nar lost track of time, absorbed in the meditative practice. The room darkened around him as the sun completed its journey across the sky, leaving only moonlight filtering through his window. Still, he continued, following each exercise in sequence, marveling at how right they felt. It was only when his stomach growled loud enough to break his concentration that Naruto finally opened his eyes. Whoa, he whispered, feeling simultaneously exhausted and invigorated. His chakra, at least the portion he'd been working with, felt more responsive, like a musical instrument finally properly tuned. The digital clock on his nightstand flashed 11:27 p.m. He'd been practicing for hours without realizing it. Tomorrow was an academy day, but for once, Naruto felt eager rather than dreading it. He couldn't wait to try these techniques on actual jutsu. With careful hands, Nar rolled the scroll back up and retied the red string. He considered returning it to its hiding place, but couldn't bear the thought of parting with it. Instead, he placed it reverently beside his pillow. The scroll was too precious, too personal to risk losing. It was physical proof that someone had loved him, had planned for him, had wanted him to succeed. As Naruto prepared for bed, his usual restless energy was replaced by a strange sense of peace. He had a purpose now beyond his vague dreams of becoming Hokage to earn acknowledgement. He had a legacy to live up to, a mother's expectations to fulfill, scrolls to find, and knowledge to uncover. Nar slipped under his threadbare blanket, curling protectively around the scroll beside him. Outside his window, the stone faces of the Hokage monument stood sentinel in the moonlight. Somewhere out there, more pieces of his mother's legacy waited to be discovered. Tomorrow, he would begin searching for where the leaves dance in stone. But tonight, for the first time in his memory, Naruto fell asleep feeling like he belonged somewhere to someone. Tears leaked from the corners of his closed eyes. But they weren't tears of loneliness. They carried the weight of 7 years of wondering, of imagining, of creating fictional parents in his mind during the coldest nights when the isolation threatened to consume him. His mother had a name, Kusha Uzumaki. His mother had loved him, had called him her beloved son, as sleep claimed him. Naruto's dreams were filled with swirling red hair and the phantom warmth of a mother's embrace. And, somewhere beyond the veil that separates the living from those who have passed on, Kusha watched over her son with fierce pride as he took his first steps toward claiming his true heritage. Morning arrived with insistent brightness. Sunlight, streaming through Naruto's window directly onto his face. He groaned, rolling away from the intrusion, only to bolt upright as his hand brushed against the scroll beside his pillow. It hadn't been a dream. Excitement propelled him out of bed with unprecedented energy. Usually, Naruto had to drag himself to the academy, forcing his feet forward with the promise of ramen afterward. Today, he couldn't get ready fast enough. He brushed his teeth with vigor, splashed water on his face, and rummaged through his drawers for the cleanest clothing available. His standard outfit, a white t-shirt with the red spiral and green goggles perched atop his spiky blonde hair, felt different now. The spiral wasn't just a random design. It was his clan's symbol. His symbol. Nar tucked the scroll carefully into his weapon pouch. He couldn't bear to leave it behind. Even though the rational part of his brain warned that bringing something so valuable to the academy risked damage or loss, but the thought of being separated from this tangible connection to his mother was unbearable. I'll be super careful, he promised the empty apartment as he locked the door behind him. The village looked different this morning. Had the colors always been this vivid? Had the air always smelled this fresh? Naruto bounced down the street, a new awareness through his veins. People still avoided his gaze, still whispered behind their hands as he passed, but somehow their rejection stung less sharply. They didn't know who he really was, but he was beginning to discover it himself. Nar arrived at the academy earlier than usual, sliding into his seat while most of his classmates were still filtering through the door. He pulled out his notebooks and a pencil, ready to pay attention for once. Everything Sensei said might contain clues to understanding his heritage or finding the next scroll. As the classroom filled, Naruto noticed the usual pattern of avoidance. The empty seats left around him despite the room reaching capacity. A dark-haired boy with an ever-present skull took the farthest seat at their shared desk, practically hanging off the edge to maintain maximum distance. Morning, Sasuke, Naruto offered, testing how his new knowledge might affect his interactions. The Iha boy grunted in response, neither friendly nor particularly hostile, just acknowledging Naruto's existence with minimal effort. It was more than most gave him. At the desk behind them, a girl with short dark hair and peculiar pale eyes quickly looked down when Nar glanced her way. Hinata Hyuga, the shyest person in class and the only one who never actively avoided him, though she rarely spoke directly to him either. Before Naruto could ponder this further, Ira Sensei entered the classroom, calling for order. The routine morning announcements passed in a blur as Naruto itched to try his mother's chakra exercises. In a practical application, his opportunity came sooner than expected. Today we'll be reviewing the transformation jutsu announced, prompting collective groans from the class. I know we've practiced this before, but consistent review builds muscle memory. Let's start with a demonstration. Nar, would you come up here, please? Naruto froze. Ira Sensei always seemed to call on him for demonstrations of techniques he struggled with, whether as a teaching moment or mild public humiliation was never entirely clear. Transformation jutsu had been his nemesis for months. His attempts resulting in bloated, barely recognizable shapes that earned him derision from classmates. But today, things were different. Today he had his mother's guidance. Sure thing, Irika Sensei. Nar bounded to the front of the class with unusual confidence, drawing suspicious looks from his instructor. Transform into me, Ra instructed, arms crossed expectantly. Nar closed his eyes briefly, centering himself as Kush's scroll had taught. He found that vast ocean of chakra within. But, instead of trying to harness it all, he carefully gathered just a small, manageable portion, a cupful from the ocean. His hands formed the required seals, deliberately, precisely, without his usual rush sloppiness. As he completed the sequence, Nar directed that controlled chakra outward with clear intent. Transform. A puff of smoke enveloped him, and for a heart-stopping moment, Nar feared he'd failed again. Then the smoke cleared and gasps rippled through the classroom. Araka-sensei's eyes widened as he found himself staring at a perfect mirror image. Not a detail was out of place. From the horizontal scar across the nose to the exact shade of his tunic vest, to the precise way his hat sat against his forehead. Naruto's voice contained naked astonishment. "How'd I do?" Naruto asked, using voice perfectly. The class erupted in shocked whispers. Naruto Uzumaki, the dead last student who couldn't perform basic jutsu correctly, had just executed a flawless transformation. Ra circled him, inspecting the transformation from all angles with increasing amazement. "This is perfect. Absolutely perfect. What changed? Have you been practicing secretly?" Nar released the jutsu, returning to his usual appearance with a self-satisfied grin. "Just figured out a better way to control my chakra. That's all. It wasn't a lie. Exactly. Just not the complete truth." Ira-sensei's expression shifted from surprise to something more complex. A mixture of pride and puzzlement. "Well, whatever you're doing differently, keep it up. That's the standard I expect from now on." Nar practically floated back to his seat, ignoring the incredulous stares of his classmates. Even Sasuke had abandoned his careful disinterest to study Naruto with narrowed eyes. For the first time in his academy career, Nar paid rapt attention to every lecture, taking actual notes instead of doodling or planning pranks. When practical exercises began in the training yard, he applied Kusha's principles to each technique with startling results. His kana hit closer to the targets. His foot positioning and taijutsu forms improved dramatically. Every jutsu attempt showed marked improvement, though not all were as perfect as his transformation had been. By lunchtime, the atmosphere around Nar had shifted palpably. Whispers followed him, but they carried confusion rather than derision. What happened to him? Did someone replace the real Naruto with a ringer? No way. That was the same kid from yesterday. Nar sat alone beneath a tree in the academy yard, unwrapping an instant ramen cup he prepared that morning. As he ate, he pulled out his mother's scroll, careful to shield it from view with his body. The chakra exercises had produced immediate results, but there was so much more to learn. His attention fixed on the clue to the next scroll's location where the leaves danced in stone. What could that mean? Leaves were everywhere in Konoha. It was the village hidden in the leaves after all. But leaves and stone, carved leaves, stone leaves, the monument. The thought struck Nar with sudden clarity. The Hokkaido monument wasn't just faces carved in stone. The entire cliff face was decorated with stylized leaf motifs, particularly around the base where ceremonial events were sometimes held. That must be it, Nar whispered excitedly, already planning an expedition after school hours. What must be it? Gnarly jumped out of his skin. He'd been so absorbed in his thoughts that he hadn't noticed someone approach. He quickly rolled up the scroll and shoved it back into his pouch before looking up to find Sensei standing over him, arms crossed. And nothing, just figured out a homework problem. Nar improvised, scratching the back of his head nervously. Ria raised a skeptical eyebrow, but didn't press further. Instead, he lowered himself to sit beside Naruto. An unprecedented event that left the boy momentarily speechless. "I wanted to talk about what happened in class today," Araka said, his voice dropping to ensure their conversation remained private. Naruto tensed, expecting accusations of cheating or demands for explanations he wasn't prepared to give. Instead, Ra continued, "I've been your instructor for 2 years now, Naruto. In all that time, I've watched you struggle with chakra control, no matter how much you practiced. Then today, overnight, you perform techniques with precision that some of our top students haven't mastered yet. He fixed Naruto with a penetrating gaze. That kind of improvement doesn't happen by accident. Something changed. It wasn't a question, but the expectation of an answer hung in the air between them. Naruto fidgeted with the empty ramen cup, mind racing. He wasn't ready to share his mother's letter. Not with anyone. Not yet. It was too personal, too precious. But he couldn't lie to Ira's sensei either. I found a different way to think about chakra control, he finally said, choosing his words carefully. Instead of trying to use all my chakra at once, I'm just using a little bit and focusing on that. It was a simplification of Kusha's technique, but not untrue. Uraka's expression softened. I see. You know, different shinobi have different chakra types and amounts. Some have naturally small reserves but excellent control. Others, he gave Naruto a meaningful look, have enormous reserves that make precision difficult. I should have recognized that might be your situation and adapted my teaching methods. Stared at his teacher, stunned by what sounded suspiciously like an apology. Had I sensei known about Hisumaki heritage all along? About their characteristic large chakra reserves. It's not your fault, sensei. Naruto replied, automatically. I didn't exactly make it easy to teach me. Uraka chuckled. No, you certainly didn't. But that's a teacher's job to find ways to reach every student, not just the easy ones. He stood brushing dirt from his pants. Keep up the good work, Nar. And if you discover any other helpful techniques, my door is always open. As Uraka walked away, Nar felt a warmth spread through his chest that had nothing to do with chakra. For the first time, a teacher had seen him, really seen him, and acknowledged his potential rather than his failings. The afternoon classes passed in a blur of anticipation as Naruto mentally mapped his route to the monument. When the final bell rang, he bolted from his seat, nearly colliding with several classmates in his Hasteto exit. What's your hurry? Dead last. Kiba Inuzuka called after him, though the usual bite in the nickname seemed lessened after Naruto's performance that day. Places to go, scrolls to find. Nar called back without thinking. Already halfway out the door. Outside, Nar paused just long enough to orient himself toward the monument before taking off at a run. The massive stone faces of previous Hokage loomed larger as he approached, their stoic expressions overlooking the village they had each protected. In their time, the monument was a popular tourist spot during daylight hours with visitors and locals alike coming to pay respects or simply admired the craftsmanship. By late afternoon, however, the crowds had thinned considerably. Only a few stragglers remained, most preparing to depart as the sun began its descent toward the horizon. Naruto slowed to a casual walk as he reached the base of the monument, trying to appear like any other visitor while his eyes scanned frantically for anything resembling leaves dancing in stone. The main viewing platform offered spectacular vistas of the village, but no obvious hiding places for a scroll. He would need to get closer to the actual cliff face. Moving with attempted nonchalance that probably looked more suspicious than if he'd simply snuck around, Naruto circled to the eastern side of the monument where maintenance access points were located. A narrow footpath primarily used by the stonemasons who periodically repaired weather damage to the carvings wound its way up the side of the cliff. Nar glanced around to ensure no one was watching, then slipped onto the restricted path. His heartbeat quickened with each step, partly from exertion as the path steepened, partly from the thrill of discovery, and partly from fear of being caught in a restricted area. The path eventually brought him to a small maintenance platform beneath the first Hokage's stern visage. From this vantage point, Naruto could see intricate decorative elements that weren't visible from below, including a band of stylized leaves carved into the stone collar of the first robe. Leaves and stone, Naruto whispered, eyes widening. But these leaves weren't dancing. They were static, formal, part of the original design. Naruto's excitement dimmed momentarily as he scanned the area, looking for anything that matched his mother's clue more precisely. That's when he noticed it. A subtle movement that shouldn't have been possible in solid stone. Near the junction where the first Hokage's face met the mountain, a small section of decorative foliage seemed to flutter slightly. Despite the absence of wind within the rock itself, Naruto scrambled closer, nearly losing his footing on the narrow ledge. As he approached, the movement became more apparent. Leaves carved in stone that somehow rippled as if caught in a gentle breeze. It had to be a genjutsu, but one so subtle and localized that it would be invisible unless you were specifically looking for it. His heart hammering against his rib cage, Naruto reached toward the anomaly. His fingers passed through what appeared to be solid stone, encountering instead a cool pocket of air. A concealment jutsu, hiding a small cavity within the monument itself. No way, he breathed, excitement making his hands tremble as he carefully felt inside the hidden space. His fingers brushed against something wrapped in fabric, the same texture as the covering around his mother's first scroll. With reverent care, Naruto extracted the object from its hiding place, revealing another scroll slightly smaller than the first, but bearing the same red Uzumaki spiral. Unlike the first scroll, this one didn't glow when he touched it. Nar frowned momentarily before understanding dawned. The chakra recognition seal had already confirmed his identity with the first scroll. This one didn't need to test him again. The maintenance platform was too precarious for a proper examination. Clutching his precious find close to his chest, Naruto carefully retraced his steps down the maintenance path, constantly checking for any sign of village security patrols. By some miracle, he made it back to ground level without being spotted rather than risk opening the scroll in public. Nar sprinted back to his apartment, taking side streets and alleyways to avoid unnecessary encounters. The sun was setting by the time he burst through his door. Breathing hard, cheeks flushed with exertion and anticipation, he cleared a space on his small table, gently placing the second scroll in the center as if it were made of glass. With trembling fingers, Nar untied the red string and slowly unrolled the parchment. The same elegant handwriting greeted him. My clever Nar, you've found the second scroll. I knew you would. If you're reading this, it means you've already begun practicing the Uzumaki chakra control techniques. How did they feel? Like coming home, I hope. Like finally wearing shoes that fit perfectly after stumbling around in one's 3 sizes too large. This scroll contains the basics of F and Jutsu, the sealing arts that made the Uzumaki clan legendary. Most shinobi view seals as tools, useful but limited to a new Uzumaki. Seals are an extension of ourselves as natural as breathing. Our chakra has a unique affinity for binding, containing, redirecting energy. Start with a simple storage seal on page 2. Practice until you can create it in your sleep. A proper Uzumaki should be able to dash off a functional storage seal in 3 seconds flat. My personal record was 2.2 seconds, but your father could never quite match that, no matter how hard he tried. Nar paused, heart skipping a beat. Another mention of his father. Still, no name, but confirmation that he'd known Fu and Jutsu as well, had competed with Kushina added. Another breadcrumb in the mystery of his parentage. There's something else you should know, Nar. Something I've debated whether to include in these early scrolls. The spiral symbol of Konoha. The one you've seen your entire life. On buildings, uniforms, and official documents. It isn't originally from Konoha at all. It's the crest of the Uzumaki clan, adopted by the Leaf Village in honor of the close alliance between Konoha and our home Yigio, the village hidden by whirling tides. Yigio was destroyed during the war. Its people scattered or killed. But before that happened, we were renowned as masters of sealing jutsu, possessors of tremendous vitality and shinobi of our word. The other nations feared our sealing abilities so much that they united specifically to wipe us out. You are the legacy of That great village. When you wear that spiral, you carry not just your mother's memory, but the heritage of an entire civilization. I've included the fundamental principles of sealing in this scroll. Study them carefully. The next scroll awaits where roots support the great tree. You'll understand when the time is right. With boundless love, your mother, Kushina Uzumaki. The remainder of the scroll contained detailed instructions for basic sealing techniques, beginning with storage seals and progressing to simple barrier formations. Diagrams illustrated the precise brush strokes required along with notes about chakra flow and common mistakes to avoid. Nar sat back, overwhelmed by this new influx of information. He wasn't just Naruto Uzumaki, orphan troublemaker of Koha. He was the descendant of an entire village. A civilization so powerful that multiple nations had united against it. The spiral he'd worn his entire life wasn't just a random symbol. It was his birthright, his family crest. And somehow, despite being all but wiped out, the Uzumaki clan's symbol had become central to Konoha's identity. What kind of relationship had existed between the villages for such an honor to be bestowed? Why didn't anyone teach this history at the academy? Questions multiplied in Naruto's mind faster than he could process them. But amidst the confusion, one certainty emerged crystal clear. He needed to master these sealing techniques. They were his heritage, his birthright. The legendary skill of a clan, nearly lost to history. With newfound determination, Naruto spread the scroll wider, revealing the detailed instructions for creating a basic storage seal. According to the diagrams, he would need special chakra-infused paper and ink to create functional seals. Where would he find such materials? The answer came in the form of a small note in the margin of the scroll. For practice, regular paper and ink will allow you to learn the patterns, though the seals won't activate. When you're ready for functional seals, look in the hidden compartment beneath the floorboard. There's a supply kit there I prepared for you. Naruto's head snapped up. There was more in the hidden compartment. He scrambled across the room, lifting the loose floorboard again. Sure enough, tucked in the far corner of the space was a small wooden box he'd overlooked in his excitement over finding the first scroll. The box contained exactly what Kusha had promised. Several sheets of special paper that hummed faintly with chakra when Naruto touched them. A brush with an unusual red handle and a small bottle of ink that seemed to shift and swirl of its own accord when he held it up to the light. Perfect, Naruto whispered, returning to the table with his treasures. For the rest of the evening, he practiced drawing the basic storage seal pattern first with regular paper and pencil until his hand grew accustomed to the movements, then graduating to the special materials. His first attempts were wobbly, the lines uneven, the proportions skewed. But with each repetition, his confidence grew. By midnight, surrounded by dozens of practice attempts, Naruto finally produced a storage seal that matched the diagram almost perfectly. As he completed the final brush stroke, the seal shimmered with subtle energy, the lines seeming to settle into the paper as if becoming part of its very fiber. Did it work? Naruto wondered aloud, examining his creation. According to the scroll, activating the seal required a small pulse of chakra while touching the center spiral. With a deep breath, Naruto placed his index finger on the focal point and channeled a tiny amount of his chakra into the pattern. Just a droplet from his vast ocean, as Kushina would say. The seal glowed bright blue for an instant, then settled into a steady, subtle Nar had created his first functional fuel in jutsu. To test it, he placed the kunai on top of the seal and channeled another pulse of chakra. The weapon disappeared in a small puff of smoke, absorbed into the dimensional pocket created by the seal. A third pulse reversed the process, the kunai reappearing exactly where it had been. I did it! Naruto shouted, jumping to his feet in excitement. I really did it. Wait until I-sensei sees this. The thought brought him up short. How would he explain suddenly? knowing few and jutsu, a rare and complex art not taught at the academy. What would happen if people discovered he had these scrolls from his mother? Naruto's celebration subsided as reality intruded. This knowledge, this connection to his mother, needed to remain secret, at least for now, until he understood why the third Hokage had kept his parentage hidden. Until he discovered more about the Uzumaki clan's relationship with Konoha. Until he found all the scrolls his mother had hidden. For him, he would need to be cautious. He could improve at the academy, yes, but gradually, not revealing everything he was learning all at once. He would keep these nighttime study sessions private, building his skills in secret until the moment was right to reveal them. With this resolution firmly in mind, Naruto carefully gathered his materials and the precious scrolls. The original letter from Kushina and this second scroll on Fujitsu basics were his most valuable possessions, more precious than all the ramen in Atakas. He wrapped them tenderly in cloth and placed them in the wooden box from the hidden compartment, which he now recognized as being decorated with subtle Uzumaki spirals around its edges. Too exhausted for another round of floor removal, Nar tucked the box beneath his pillow for the night. Tomorrow would bring academy classes, more practice, and perhaps exploration of the third clue where roots support the great tree. As he settled into bed, physical fatigue warred with mental stimulation. His mind raced with possibilities, with questions, with plans. But beneath the intellectual whirlwind lay a bedrock of emotional certainty that Naruto had never experienced before. He belonged to something. He came from somewhere. He was the son of Kusha Uzumaki, a woman who had loved him enough to create this elaborate legacy, who had believed in his potential even before he was born. He was the descendant of a clan so formidable that entire nations had feared them. And, somewhere out there, scattered throughout Konoha, like stars in a constellation, more pieces of his heritage awaited discovery. More connections to the mother he'd never known, but who was somehow becoming more real with each passing day. As sleep finally claimed him, Naruto's dreams were filled with swirling red hair, dancing leaves of stone, and intricate seals that pulsed with the rhythm of his heart. For the first time in his young life, Nar Uzumaki slept with a smile on his face and tears of joy drying on his cheeks. He wasn't just the village pariah anymore. He was Naruto Uzumaki, son of Kusha, heir to a legendary clan. And he was just beginning to discover what that truly meant. Morning light exploded through Naruto's window, fracturing across his face in golden shards. He bolted upright, chest heaving from a dream where crimson strands had pulled him through swirling waters. The wooden box containing his mother's scrolls remained clutched against his chest. He'd fallen asleep holding it. I didn't oversleep, did I? Nar muttered, glancing at his clock. The digital numbers blinked 617 earlier than he'd ever willingly awakened before. Yet sleep felt impossible now with excitement crackling through his veins like lightning chakra. Today would be different. He was different. Naruto bounded from bed, the floorboards creaking beneath his sudden movement. He paused at his closet, hand hovering over his usual white shirt with the red spiral. The symbol that had once seemed arbitrary now pulsed with meaning. His clan's emblem, his birthright, but something about it felt wrong now, too casual for the weight it carried. Pushing aside hangers, Naruto dug into the back of his closet where he kept clothes rarely worn. His fingers brushed against fabric in a deeper shade of blue, a gift from the third Hokage last birthday that he deemed too boring at the time. He pulled it out, a long-sleeved shirt with reinforced elbows for training. Practical and sturdy. More importantly, it had space on the sleeve where he could add an Uzumaki spiral. Decision made. Naruto dressed quickly, pairing the blue shirt with his orange pants. From the box beneath his pillow, he extracted his newly created storage seal and a kunai, with precise movements that would have shocked his academy. Instructors, he carefully cut a small spiral pattern from the hem of his old white shirt. Not perfect, but it'll work, he murmured, then used a safety pin to attach the spiral emblem to his right sleeve. The makeshift clan symbol wasn't elegant, but it was intentional. A declaration of identity rather than a random decoration. Nar tucked the wooden box with his mother's scrolls under the loose floorboard, concealing his precious legacy once more. Before closing it, he hesitated, then removed the basic scroll with the chakra control exercises. That one he could justify having, if questioned, simple training material that any determined student might find in the library. Ready, he announced to the empty apartment, slinging his backpack over his shoulders and heading out into the pre-dawn quiet of Konoha. The village streets stretched empty before him, shopkeepers only just beginning to raise their shutters for the day's business. Without the usual crowds, Konoha revealed different facets of itself. Weathered stone pathways that had supported generations of shinobi. Architectural details lost in the daily bustle. The way mountain mist curled between buildings before the sun burned it away. Rather than heading directly to the academy, Naruto found his feet carrying him toward the Hokage monument. His mother's clue about the next scroll where roots support the great tree tumbled in his mind like autumn leaves caught in a whirlwind. Something about the phrasing tugged at his memory. The academy instructors often referred to Konoha as the Great Tree in their history lessons. The roots that supported it could be interpreted literally as the village's foundation stones or figuratively as the founding principles and people who had established the village. The Great Tree, Naruto muttered, gaze lifting to the massive stone faces watching over the village. A memory flashed. Uraraka Sensei discussing the significance of the academy's location during a rare field lesson. Outside the classroom, the Konoha Academy stands at the base of the great tree that is our village. Like roots supporting a mighty oak, we nurture the next generation that will one day form new branches reaching for the sky. Naruto's pace quickened, his path now purposeful. The academy wouldn't open for students for another hour, giving him precious time to explore unobserved. Morning dew still clung to the grass as Naruto approached the academy training grounds. The main building stood silent, windows dark, but Naruto's attention focused elsewhere on the massive oak tree that dominated the central courtyard. Ancient and sprawling, its branches created a natural training arena for students practicing tree walking techniques. The great tree, Naruto whispered, approaching the enormous trunk with newfound reverence. The oak had stood here since before the academy's construction, rumored to have been grown from a seedling infused with the first Hokage's wood-style chakra. Its roots erupted from the ground in massive twisting arches before plunging back into the earth, creating natural seating areas for students during outdoor lessons. Naruto circled the tree, examining each gnarled root formation. Nothing immediately jumped out as a hiding place. His fingers traced the rough bark, searching for anomalies similar to the disguised cavity in the Hokage monument. Nothing. Frustration bubbled in his chest. He was missing something obvious. He could feel it. Naruto closed his eyes, recalling his mother's exact words where roots support the great tree. His eyes snapped open. Maybe the clue wasn't as literal as he'd assumed. If the great tree was Konoha itself, then the roots could be the academy, Nar exclaimed, spinning to face the building. The academy roots support the tree that is Konoha. With renewed determination, Naruto approached the academy building, circling its perimeter with keen eyes. Most areas looked uniform, standard construction with little opportunity for hidden compartments. But as he rounded the back corner, Nar noticed something peculiar in the foundation stones. Near ground level, partially obscured by decorative shrubs, one stone bore a faint spiral pattern almost indistinguishable from natural erosion marks. To anyone not specifically looking for Uzumaki symbols, it would appear as random weathering. To Naruto's newly sensitized eyes, it practically glowed with significance. glancing around to ensure he remained unobserved. Nar crouched beside the stone, fingers probing the spiral indentation. Unlike the hidden compartment in the monument, this stone didn't yield to physical pressure. Remembering how the first scroll had responded to his touch, Nar placed his palm flat against the spiral and channeled a whisper of chakra into the stone. The reaction was immediate. The spiral illuminated with a soft blue glow, and the entire stone silently slid inward, revealing a small cavity behind. Within lay another scroll wrapped in the now familiar crimson fabric bearing the Uzumaki spiral. Yes, Naruto, Whisper shouted, quickly retrieving the scroll and replacing the stone with another. Pulse of chakra. Footsteps and voices from the direction of the main entrance signaled the arrival of early instructors. With the scroll safely tucked inside his jacket, Nar casually strolled around to the front of the building, adopting an innocent expression that fooled precisely no one. Naruto. Ira's surprised voice cut through the morning quiet. You're here early. The Tunin instructor stood at the academy entrance, keys in hand, brow furrowed in suspicion or concern. Possibly Naruto called with deliberately exaggerated cheerfulness. Just thought I'd get some extra practice in before class. Ira's eyebrow arched higher. Extra practice? You before class? Believe it, Nar shot back, scratching the back of his head nervously. Those chakra control exercises you showed us yesterday were pretty cool and I wanted to try them again. Not entirely untrue, though the exercises in question had come from Kusha's scroll rather than Rei's lesson. Something shifted in Rei's expression. Surprise, giving way to cautious approval. Well, that's commendable, Nar. The practice field is yours. Until class starts then. Nar grinned, genuine gratitude warming his chest. Thanks, Uraka-sensei. As Ira disappeared into the building, Naruto exhaled heavily. That had been close. He needed a better plan for exploring the village without arousing suspicion. For now, though, the weight of the scroll against his rib cage reminded him that he'd succeeded in his morning's mission. With time to spare before classes, Naruto retreated to a secluded corner of the practice field, partially screened by shrubbery. There he carefully extracted the scroll, heart pounding with anticipation. Unlike the previous two, this scroll was bound with a thin red cord that seemed to shimmer slightly in the early morning light. The red thread of fate, Naruto murmured, remembering the title of an old folk tale the third had once read to him. About invisible red strings connecting people destined to meet. With reverent fingers, Naruto untied the cord and unrolled the scroll just enough to read its opening lines. My determined Naruto. 3 scrolls found already. Your mother couldn't be prouder. I've always believed that knowledge is the most powerful weapon a shinobi can possess, more valuable than any jutsu or keki jinkai. That's why I've scattered these lessons throughout Koha rather than leaving them all in one place. The journey of discovery is as important as what you find. This scroll contains the fundamental forms of Uzumaki-style taijutsu. While the academy teaches standardized fighting techniques suitable for most shinobi, our clan develops specialized forms that complement our natural advantages, high stamina, tremendous chakra reserves, and remarkable healing capacity. Uzumaki taijutsu focuses on continuous movement, wearing down opponents to relentless pressure rather than single devastating strikes. It might seem counterintuitive at first compared to what you're learning at the academy, but trust the wisdom of generations before you. Study these forms carefully. Naruto. Practice them away from prying eyes until they become second nature. True. Uzumaki fights like a whirlpool, drawing opponents into our rhythm before they realize they're drowning. Your journey continues where you find a kindred spirit. Someone else who walks a difficult path. The next clue waits where still waters reflect true vision with endless faith in you. Kusha Uzumaki. The remainder of the scroll contained detailed illustrations of taijutsu stances and movement patterns unlike anything taught at the academy where standard Koha techniques emphasized balanced postures and efficient strikes. The Uzumaki style shown in these diagrams seemed almost chaotic. Fighters maintaining constant motion using spiraling footwork that never placed them in the same position twice. Whoa! Naruto breathed, eyes widening as he studied the intricate forms. This was completely different from the rigid stances Mizuki-sensei drilled into academy students. It looked more like dancing than fighting. A bell chimed in the distance, signaling students to assemble for morning classes. Reluctantly, Naruto carefully re-rolled the scroll, tied the red cord around it, and tucked it securely in his backpack. The taijutsu forms would have to wait until after school. For now, he needed to focus on not drawing unwanted attention. As Naruto entered the classroom, the usual pattern of avoidance played out. Empty seats surrounding his usual spot despite the room filling rapidly. He slid into his chair, noticing how Sasuke Iha once again took the farthest position possible while still technically sharing the same desk. But something had shifted since yesterday. The whispers that followed Naruto now carried a different tone. Did you see him transform into Ira-sensei yesterday? Perfect copy. Even got that little scar. Right. Probably just got lucky. Naruto kept his expression neutral while internally grinning. Let them wonder. He had bigger secrets to protect. Now the morning lectures dragged interminably as Naruto's mind continuously drifted to the taijutsu scroll tucked in his backpack. When finally announced practical exercises in the training yard, Nar nearly leapt from his seat in eagerness. Today, we'll continue working on basic taijutsu forms, explained as students lined up in the practice area. Remember, proper stance is the foundation of all combat techniques. Without stability, power means nothing. Naruto fell into line with the other students, automatically adopting the Academy's standard fighting stance. But now, with knowledge of his clan's techniques burning in his mind, the position felt awkward. Restrictive. The Uzumaki style emphasized perpetual movement. The complete opposite of the static poses Araka was demonstrating. Nar, your right foot should be farther back, Ria called, noticing his distraction. Center your weight between both legs. Sorry, sensei, Nar replied, adjusting his position while internally questioning everything he'd been taught about combat positioning. Throughout the practice session, Naruto struggled with this disconnect. Should he continue with the Academy's standard forms or begin incorporating his newly discovered heritage techniques? The latter might draw unwanted questions, but the former now felt fundamentally wrong for his body. As students paired off for sparring practice, Naruto found himself facing Ka-Anuka. The feral-looking boy grinned, canine teeth gleaming. Ready to get your butt kicked, Uzumaki? Ka taunted, falling into the Academy's standard offensive stance. You wish, dog breath, Naruto retorted, automatically dropping into position. But as Ka launched his first attack, a straightforward punch aimed at Naruto's chest, something unexpected happened. Instead of blocking with the Academy's taught technique, Naruto's body seemed to move on instinct, spiraling away from the strike in a fluid motion reminiscent of the diagrams in Kush's scroll. KBA's momentum carried him forward as his target vanished from the expected position. Naruto continued the circular movement, using KBA's forward energy to position himself for a sweeping kick that caught the Inuzuka completely off guard. Both boys froze in shock as Ka found himself suddenly on the ground, staring up at an equally surprised Nar. How did you? Ka began, confusion written across his face. Excellent redirection of force, Nar. Araka's voice cut through the moment. He'd been observing their match and now approached with an appraising expression, though. That's not a technique we've covered yet. Heat rushed to Naruto's cheeks. I saw some older kids practicing and thought it looked cool. He improvised. I narrowed slightly, but he nodded. Initiative in learning is commendable. However, during class exercises, please stick to the techniques we're currently studying. His voice softened slightly. You can show me what else you've been learning after hours if you'd like. Some feedback. Yes, sensei. Nar agreed, helping Ka to his feet. The rest of the sparring session passed without incident as Naruto consciously restricted himself to academy standard movements. But the seed had been planted. His body had responded naturally to the Uzumaki style, as if the techniques were written in his very blood. Conscious restraint now felt like trying to hold back the tide with his bare hands. As lunch break arrived, Nar retreated to his usual solitary spot beneath a tree. At the edge of the academy grounds, he unwrapped a simple lunch. Rice balls and dried beef while his mind raced with possibilities. The taijutsu forms in the scroll were clearly effective, but practicing them openly would invite questions he wasn't prepared to answer. So absorbed was he in this dilemma that Naruto failed to notice the approach of soft footsteps until a shadow fell across his lunch. Excuse me. And Naruto. Naruto's head snapped up, startled to find Hinata Hyuga standing before him. Fingers pressed together nervously, pale eyes directed at the ground rather than meeting his gaze. Hinata. Confusion colored his voice. The Hyuga had never voluntarily approached him before. I saw your match with Kibukun, she said. Voice barely above a whisper. That movement you used, it was beautiful. Quote. Naruto blinked, completely unprepared for this interaction. Hinata Hyuga, the shyest girl in class, daughter of Koha's most prestigious clan, had not only noticed his fighting style, but had sought him out to compliment it. Thanks, he replied, uncertainly. It was just something I've been practicing. Hinata's eyes, those distinctive Hyuga eyes that saw everything, finally lifted to meet his. It reminded me of water, she said. Her stutter momentarily vanishing as enthusiasm overtook nervousness. The way you moved around Kiboken's attack instead of against it. Something clicked in Naruto's mind. The Hyuga clan's gentle fist style also emphasized fluid movement and redirection rather than brute force. Perhaps that's why Hinata had recognized something familiar in his improvised technique. Before he could formulate a response, Hinata's courage seemed to desert her. Her gaze dropped again, a blush staining her cheeks. I'm as sorry to interrupt your lunch. I'll jiggo now. Wait, Nar called as she began to turn away. An impulse seized him. The memory of his mother's clue about the next scroll. Your journey continues where you find a kindred spirit. Someone else who walks a difficult path. Could Hinata be that kindred spirit? The girl whose family expectations weighed on her slender shoulders like mountains. Who, despite her prestigious lineage, seemed as isolated in her own way as Naruto was in his. Do you want to sit? He offered, gesturing to the empty grass beside him. Hinata froze, eyes widening in surprise. For a moment, Nar thought she might flee, but then she gave a tiny nod and carefully settled beside him. Maintaining a respectable distance, an awkward silence descended, broken only by the distant shouts of their classmates playing in the main yard. So Naruto began, searching for neutral conversation ground. You noticed the water thing about how I moved, huh? Hinata nodded, some of her earlier enthusiasm returning. The Hyuga fighting style is based on similar principles, she explained. Her stutter less pronounced when discussing technical matters. We trained to recognize movement patterns. Yours was different from the academy standard. Alarm bells rang in Naruto's mind. If the detail-oriented Hyuga had noticed the distinction, others might too. Different bad? He asked cautiously. Different good, she corrected with unexpected firmness. Most academy students try to stand their ground against stronger opponents. It rarely works. Your method flowing around the attack is much more effective for someone who might not have raw power advantage. The insight struck Naruto like lightning. Of course, his mother scroll had emphasized that Utsuaki Taijutsu wasn't about overpowering opponents, but wearing them down through sustained movement. It was a style perfectly adapted for someone who might be outsized, but possessed tremendous stamina. Exactly his situation against many of his peers. That makes so much sense, Naruto said, genuine appreciation warming his voice. Hey, Hinata, do you ever practice outside of class? Like extra stuff your family teaches you? The question seemed to touch a nerve. Hinata's shoulders tense slightly. I try, she said softly. My father arranges additional training, but I don't progress as quickly as expected. The sadness in her voice resonated with something deep inside Nar. The familiar ache of never quite measuring up to others' expectations. Here was someone who truly understood what it meant to be judged and found wanting despite trying their hardest. Maybe we could practice together sometime. The words tumbled out before Naruto could fully consider them. I mean, you know, all that fancy Hyuga stuff, and I've got some techniques I'm working on. We could help each other. Hinata's head jerked up, pearl eyes wide with surprise. You want to train with me? Why not? Naruto shrugged, attempting nonchalant while his heart hammered against his ribs. This was the first time he'd ever invited anyone to do anything with him. Seems like we both could use the practice, and it's always better with a partner, right? A small, hesitant smile bloomed on Hinata's face, transforming her usual anxious expression into something quietly radiant. I would like that very much, Naruto. The lunch bell rang, signaling students to return to classrooms. As they gathered their things, Nar felt something shift in the atmosphere between them, a tenuous connection forming where isolation had existed before. After school, he suggested impulsively. There's a training ground near the river that's usually empty. Hinata nodded, a new determination straightening her posture. I'll be there. The afternoon. Classes crawled by at an excruciating pace as Naruto's attention repeatedly drifted to the window, tracking the sun's slow arc across the sky. By the time Ira finally dismissed them, Naruto had spent more time watching the clock than listening to the lecture on Konoha's diplomatic relations with neighboring countries. He practically bolted from the classroom, pausing only briefly to ensure Hinata had noticed his departure. A quick glance over his shoulder confirmed she was following at a more measured pace, having apparently informed her usual escort that she would be training late. The training ground Naruto had mentioned sat at the eastern edge of the village, bordered by the Naka River on one side and dense forest on the other. Its distance from the village center made it unpopular with most shinobi who preferred the convenience of more centrally low practice areas. For Naruto's purposes, this isolation was perfect. He arrived first, using the solitary moments to extract the Taijutsu scroll from his backpack. With quick, eager movements, Nar unwielded across a flat boulder, weighing down the corners with small stones. The illustrated forms seemed to leap from the page in the afternoon sunlight. The flowing lines of the diagrams almost moving on their own. Still waters reflect true vision, Nar murmured, recalling his mother's clue about the next scroll's location. His gaze drifted to the Naka River, its surface a mirror of the sky above. Could it be that simple? Was the next scroll hidden somewhere along the riverbank? Before he could pursue that line of thought, soft footsteps announced Hinata's arrival. Nar hastily rolled the scroll partially closed, leaving visible only the basic stance diagrams that might pass as general reference material rather than clan specific techniques. You came, he exclaimed with genuine pleasure, then immediately felt foolish for sounding so surprised. Hata approached her academy outfit exchanged for training clothes, loose-fitting pants, and a long-sleeved lavender jacket with the hither crest embroidered on the sleeve. Her eyes briefly flickered to the partially visible scroll before returning to Naruto's face. Of course, she replied softly. I said I would. Something warm unfurled in Naruto's chest. The simple recognition that someone had kept their word to him. How strange that such a basic courtesy could feel so significant. So he began suddenly uncertain how to proceed. He'd never actually trained with anyone. voluntarily before. How should we do this? Hinata considered for a moment. Perhaps, we could begin with basic forms, show each other our different approaches. The suggestion was perfectly reasonable. Yet Nar hesitated. How much of the Uzumaki style could he reveal without inviting questions he couldn't answer? But then, Hinata had already noticed his departure from standard techniques. Perhaps limited demonstration was safer than attempted secrecy. Okay, he agreed. You first. Hinata nodded, stepping into an open area of the training ground. Without the nervous hesitation that characterized her academy performance, she flowed into the opening stance of the gentle fist, feet positioned precisely, one palm extended forward, the other held in reserve near her center. The gentle fist relies on precision, she explained, voice steadier than Nar had ever heard it in class. We target the chakra pathway system rather than causing external damage. As Hinata demonstrated a basic kata, Nar watched in fascination. Her movements possessed an elegant efficiency completely unlike the power-focused techniques taught at the academy, where standard Koha Tai Tutsu employed direct blocks and counterattacks. Hinata's form utilized subtle redirections and lightning-fast strikes to theoretical pressure points. That's amazing, Naruto said when she finished. Genuinely impressed. You make it look so natural. A blush colored Hinata's cheeks at the praise. It's just the basic form. My father says, my execution lacks proper intensity. The familiar note of self-doubt in her voice struck a chord in Nar. How many times had he heard similar critiques from academy instructors? How often had he internalized their judgments? Until he believed himself inherently deficient. Well, I think it looked perfect, he declared firmly. Your dad probably just can't see how good you actually are. Hinata's eyes widened at his assessment, but before she could respond, Naruto continued, my turn now, I guess. Taking a deep breath, he moved to center of the clearing. The Uzumaki stance felt foreign yet familiar as he positioned his feet in the spiraling pattern illustrated in his mother's scroll. Unlike the solid-rooted poses taught at the academy, this stance maintained only momentary contact with the ground, body constantly in motion like water flowing across stones. This style is all about continuous movement, Naruto explained, echoing his mother's words, never staying still long enough to become a target. As he began moving through the basic form, Naruto felt something extraordinary happen. The awkwardness that had plagued his academy taijutsu training evaporated, replaced by a fluid harmony between intention and execution. His body seemed to recognize these patterns on some cellular level, responding with a coordination he'd never experienced before. The katata built in complexity. Spiraling footwork expanding outward then contracting inward. Arms tracing circular patterns that could redirect incoming attacks or generate surprising force from seemingly minimal movement. Naruto lost himself in the flow, forgetting his audience. Until he completed the sequence and turned to find Hinata watching with undisguised amazement. That was, she began, searching for adequate words. I've never seen anything like it. It's not any standard Koha form. Naruto froze, suddenly, aware he might have revealed too much. It's something I've been working on myself, he improvised, combining different techniques I've observed. Hinata's expression remained thoughtful, but she didn't press the issue. Instead, she asked, would you show me how to do the beginning part? The spiral step. Relief flooded through Nar. Questions about the style's origin he couldn't answer but demonstrating specific techniques that he could manage. Sure. It starts with your weight on your back foot like this. He demonstrated shifting into position. Then you sort of push off while turning so your momentum carries you in a circle. Hinata attempted to mimic the movement, her natural grace aiding the transition though the unfamiliar pattern caused her to wobble slightly. Almost Nar encouraged. But you're trying to control it too much. This isn't about perfect positioning. It's about continuous flow. Without thinking, he moved behind her, lightly placing his hands on her shoulders to guide her through the proper motion. Feel how it's one continuous movement. Your body never actually stops. Only when Hinata went completely rigid beneath his touch did Naruto realize what he'd done. He snatched his hands away as if burned. Apologies tumbling from his lips. Sorry, I didn't mean to. I should have asked first. I wasn't thinking. It's okay. Hinata interrupted, her voice barely audible. Though her face had turned crimson, she didn't seem angry. I was just surprised. An awkward silence descended. Both children suddenly hyper-aware of the social boundaries that had been momentarily forgotten in their shared enthusiasm. Let me try again, Hinata said, finally, breaking the tension. With visible determination, she repositioned herself and attempted the spiraling step once more. This time, she surrendered more completely to the movement's flow, allowing momentum to carry her through the turn rather than attempting to maintain rigid control. The result was remarkably close to the form Naruto had demonstrated. That's it, Nar exclaimed, genuine excitement overriding the lingering awkwardness. You got it, way faster than I did. Hinata's smile, small but unmistakably proud, transformed her usually anxious features. It feels different. Free somehow. Exactly. Naruto bounced on his toes, energized by her understanding. The academy style is all about standing your ground, but this is about never being where your opponent expects. As the afternoon progressed, they continued exchanging techniques. Naruto demonstrating modified versions of the Uzumaki forms while Hinata shared basic gentle fist exercises that didn't require Bakugan activation. To Naruto's surprise, many principles overlap despite the style's apparent differences. Both emphasized awareness of energy flow, efficient movement, and tactical positioning rather than raw power. Your chakra control exercises from yesterday, Hinata mentioned as they pause for water. They seem similar to early gentle fist training. Naruto nearly choked on his drink. You noticed that too? She nodded. Hyuga. Children learn to sense and direct chakra before they can walk. The cup visualization. You mentioned to Raka-sensei isolating a small portion of chakra for precise tasks is very similar to our basic training. The coincidence seemed too significant to ignore. Had Kusha deliberately incorporated elements of Huda training into her instructions, or did all advanced chakra control techniques eventually converge on similar principles? Before Naruto could ponder this further, a flash of light caught his attention. Sunlight reflecting off the river's surface as it shifted from amber afternoon to the deeper gold of approaching sunset. Still waters reflect true vision. The clue echoed in his mind, suddenly clarifying with Hinata's presence. The Hyuga were renowned for their Bakugan, eyes that saw truth beyond ordinary perception. Could his mother's clue be referring not to the river itself, but to someone with the true vision of the Bakugan? Hinata, Naruto began carefully. Your family's eyes, the Bakugan. They can see chakra, right? She nodded, seemingly surprised by the sudden topic change. Yes, and much more. We can see through solid objects, identify chakra pathways, observe tiny details at great distances. Could you? Naruto hesitated, unsure how to phrase his request without revealing too much. Could you look at that big oak tree by the riverbank? With your Bakugan, I mean, I've always wondered if trees have chakra systems, too. Confusion flitted across Anata's features, but she nodded. I can check. My Bakugan isn't fully developed yet, but it should be sufficient for examining a tree. Forming a hand sign, Hinata whispered, Bakugan. Veins bulged around her eyes as the dormant Keki Genkai activated, transforming her pale irises into more defined, intense versions of themselves. Her gaze fixed on the ancient oak Naruto had indicated a Nile giant, whose roots plunged into the riverbank while its branches stretched over the water, creating dappled shadows on the surface. Trees do have chakra, she confirmed after a moment. Not like humans or animals, but a slow-moving energy that she broke off suddenly, head tilting in apparent confusion. That's strange. Naruto's heart rate accelerated. What is one of the tree's roots? The large one extending into the river. It has a concentrated chakra signature embedded within it. Almost like she squinted, focusing more intently, like something sealed with chakra is inside the wood itself. Triumph surged through Nar. Another scroll. It had to be, but hidden inside a living tree root. How was he supposed to extract it without damaging the tree? Can you tell exactly where in the root this chakra concentration is? He asked, trying to sound merely curious rather than urgent. Hinata pointed to a section of root that extended into the shallow water near the riverbank. There, about 30 centimeters below the surface. Nar approached the spot, mind racing. The water was clear enough to see the massive roots stretching beneath the surface like a sleeping serpent. Nothing visibly distinguished the section Hinata had indicated. No markings, no obvious access point. Thanks, Hinata, he said, turning back to her with forced casualness. That's really interesting about tree chakra. I never knew that before. Hinata deactivated her Birugan, the prominent veins receding into normal appearance. Why are you interested in that specific tree? She asked, her perceptiveness catching Naruto off guard. No reason, he answered too quickly, then backpedaled at her skeptical expression. Well, I mean, it's the biggest tree around here, so I figured it would have the most chakra to observe. Hinata didn't appear entirely convinced, but thankfully didn't press further. The sun had begun to dip below the tree, casting long shadows across the training ground. It's getting late, she observed. I should return home before my father sends someone to look for me. Disappointment mingled with relief in Naruto's chest. He needed Hinata to leave so he could investigate the route. But he genuinely enjoyed training with her, the first person who'd ever voluntarily spent time with him outside of mandatory academy activities. This was fun, he said, surprised by the sincerity in his own voice. We should do it again sometime. Hinata's smile, small but genuine, lit her face in the golden evening light. I would like that very much, Naruto. As they gathered their things, an impulse seized Nar. Same time, tomorrow, he suggested, heart suddenly pounding. Hinata's eyes widened in apparent surprise that he'd want to continue their training so soon. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded. I'll have to tell my father I'm receiving additional academy instruction. But yes, tomorrow. They parted ways at the forest edge. Hinata heading back toward the Hyuga compound while Naruto ostensibly took the path toward his apartment. As soon as she disappeared from view, however, he doubled back, racing toward the riverside oak tree. The sun had nearly set, painting the water's surface with fiery oranges and deep purples. Nar knelt beside the riverbank, rolling up his sleeves as he prepared to reach into the water. The October evening had turned chilly and the river would be cold. But the promise of another connection to his mother outweighed any momentary discomfort. Taking a deep breath, Nar plunged his hand into the water, feeling along the massive root for any anomaly that might indicate a hidden compartment. The water was frigid, numbing his fingers almost immediately, making the task more difficult. Nothing felt unusual, just smooth, water-polished wood beneath his questing fingers. Frustration mounting, Naruto remembered how the previous hiding places had responded to his chakra. Without removing his hand from the water, he channeled a small amount of chakra into his palm while pressing it against the section of root Hinata had identified. For a breathless moment, nothing happened. Then a warm pulse answered his chakra. A resonance from within the wood itself. The surface beneath his palm softened, becoming pliable like clay rather than solid wood. Nar pushed gently and his fingers sank into the root as if it were merely an illusion. His hand closed around something solid within the wooden matrix, cylindrical and wrapped in familiar fabric. With careful movements, he extracted the object from its living sanctuary, marveling as the wood seamlessly closed behind it. leaving no trace of disturbance. Dripping and shivering, Naruto cradled his prize. Another scroll, smaller than the previous ones, but bearing the same Muzumaki spiral. This wrapping was a deeper crimson, almost the color of blood in the fading light. Too excited to wait until he returned home, Nar settled beneath the oak tree and unrolled the scroll with trembling fingers. My precious son, if you're reading this, you've discovered something crucial about yourself. You work well with others when given the chance. The still waters of my clue refer not just to the river, but to someone with calm insight who could help you see what remains hidden from ordinary vision. You Suzumakis have always valued connections above all else. Our sealing techniques are fundamentally about understanding relationships between elements, energies, beings. While we were known for our individual power, our true strength came from bonds formed with allies and friends. Konoha itself was founded on such a bond. Between your clan and the Senju. The first Hokage's wife was Mido Uzumaki, forging a literal blood alliance between our peoples. This is partly why Koha adopted our spiral as their symbol after Yugio's fall, honoring that unbreakable connection even after our village was destroyed. The scroll you now hold contains intermediate sealing techniques focusing on connecting separate chakra sources. These are the foundations of barrier jutsu, sensing seals, and healing applications. I've included exercises that require a partner. Perhaps whoever helped you find this scroll might be willing to practice with you. Trust your instincts about who to share your journey with. Nar, a burden divided becomes lighter. Joy shared multiplies. I carried you alone for 9 months, but I never intended for you to walk your path in solitude. Your next step awaits where shadows guard ancient knowledge. Look beneath the obvious. With pride in your growing connections, Kusha Uzumaki, Naruto read the letter twice, heart swelling with each word. His mother had anticipated his friendship with Anata or someone like her, had somehow known he would need help to find this particular scroll, had encouraged him to build connections rather than struggling alone. The technical portion of the scroll detailed sealing configurations that build upon the basic storage seal from the previous scroll, introducing concepts of chakra resonance between separate seals. According to Kushina's notes, these techniques form the foundation for barrier jutsu that could be maintained by multiple shinobi working in concert, far stronger than any individual effort. As darkness fully claimed the forest, Naruto carefully re-rolled the scroll and tucked it into his backpack alongside the Taitsu instructions. 4 scrolls now discovered, each revealing another facet of his heritage, each pushing him further along a path he never imagined existed. The clue about shadows guarding ancient knowledge would have to wait for tomorrow's interpretation. For now, Nar had plenty to process, both the technical knowledge from the scroll and the more personal revelation that his mother had wanted him to form bonds with others. Naruto stood brushing dirt from his pants as he prepared to head home. The training session with Anata replayed in his mind, her gentle guidance, her understanding of his unorthodox movements, the way she'd accepted his invitation for tomorrow without hesitation. Perhaps the red thread of fate his mother had referenced wasn't just the cord binding the scroll, but the connections beginning to form in his life, tenuous yet persistent, pulling him from isolation towards something he'd always craved, but never properly named: community, belonging, friendship. As Naruto made his way back toward the village, the weight of the scrolls in his backpack felt like a promise rather than a burden. For the first time, he wasn't just chasing knowledge of his past. He was building a foundation for his future, one connection at a time. Stars punctured the velvet darkness overhead as Naruto hurried through Konoha's winding streets. The village transformed at night. Familiar landmarks morphed into mysterious silhouettes. Ordinary sounds amplified in the quiet. His footsteps echoed against cobblestone, each one carrying him further from discovery and closer to the sanctuary of his apartment. A flash of movement caught his eye. An Anbu patrol ghosting across rooftops, moonlight glinting off porcelain masks. Naruto froze in the shadows of a storage shed, heartbeat thundering in his ears. The black-clad figures vanished as swiftly as they'd appeared, but the encounter ignited a spark of paranoia in Naruto's chest. Did they know what he was doing? Was someone watching his movements? The previously triumphant evening suddenly felt dangerous. The scrolls in his backpack burned against his spine like signal flares, announcing his secrets to the night. Naruto hurried onward with renewed urgency, taking less traveled pathways and doubling back twice to ensure no one followed. When his apartment door finally clicked shut behind him, Nar exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Safety for the moment. He dropped his backpack on the table and extracted his treasures, arranging all 4 scrolls in a row across the warm wooden surface. What are you trying to tell me, Mom? He whispered, fingers tracing the spiral pattern that connected them all. The first scroll, chakra control, techniques specifically designed for Uzumaki's overwhelming reserves. The second, basic sealing arts, the foundation of his clan's legendary reputation. The third, taijutsu forms that embraced continuous movement rather than static power. The fourth, intermediate seals focusing on connections between separate chakra sources. A pattern emerged when viewed together. A comprehensive education tailored specifically to his inheritance. Not random techniques, but a carefully constructed curriculum designed to build upon itself. His mother hadn't just left him scraps of knowledge. She'd created an entire training program. Naruto unrolled the fourth scroll again, attention fixed on the next clue. Shadows guard ancient knowledge. The phrasing tickled something in his memory. A casual comment from Ra-sensei during a history lesson about village institutions. The archives are maintained by specialized tune and sometimes called the Shadow Guards. Ra had explained they preserve ancient knowledge dating back to before Konoha's founding the archives. It had to be, but accessing them wouldn't be as simple as climbing the monument or exploring academy grounds located beneath the Hokage Tower. The archives were restricted to Chunin rank and above, with specific sections requiring even higher clearance. Naruto's shoulders slumped. How was he supposed to search a forbidden area without getting caught? Even his pranking expertise had limits. Ian ambushed him, jaw cracking with sudden exhaustion. The day's events, training with Inada, discovering the fourth scroll, processing all this new information, had drained his seemingly boundless energy reserves. Tomorrow, he promised the scrolls as he carefully returned them to their hiding place beneath the floorboard. I'll figure it out tomorrow. Sleep claimed him, almost instantly, carrying him into dreams filled with swirling red hair, pale eyes, reflecting moonlight, and corridors of shadow guarding secrets just beyond his reach. Morning exploded with opportunity. Nar bolted upright in bed, overnight inspiration crystallizing into a workable plan. The archives might be restricted, but the administrative offices above them weren't, at least not during regular business hours. When civilians came to file permits and paperwork. If he could sneak into the general office area, he might find a way downstairs without arousing suspicion. It was risky, but potential reward outweighed consequence. The academy would have to wait. Some lessons were more important than others. Naruto dressed quickly, selecting clothing that wouldn't stand out. The blue long-sleeved shirt from yesterday, minus the makeshift Uzumaki patch paired with his darkest pants. Nothing orange or attention-grabbing today. His mission required stealth, not his usual flamboyance. He grabbed a blank scroll and pen from his meager supplies, tucking them inside a worn portfolio the third Hokage had given him last birthday. With his hair dampened and combed down to reduce its distinctive spikiness, Nar practiced an expression of serious concentration in his cracked bathroom mirror. Just a regular kid delivering documents, he muttered, perfecting his disguise. Nothing suspicious at all. The transformation wasn't perfect, but it might be enough to avoid Immediate detection. More importantly, it concealed his identity from a distance. The brightly colored, loud-mouthed prankster temporarily replaced by an unremarkable messenger boy. Nar left his apartment as morning fog still clung to Konoha's streets, flowing down from the surrounding forests like ghostly fingers. The Hokage Tower rose above the village center, its distinctive red roof piercing the mist. Already villagers converged on the administrative complex. Merchants seeking permits, farmers discussing crop forecasts, shinobi reporting for mission assignments. Perfect cover for one small boy with devious intentions. Nar inserted himself into the steady stream of people entering the building, hunching his shoulders and keeping his gaze down. The portfolio clutched against his chest completed the illusion of a child unofficial business. Perhaps delivering documents for an academy instructor or running an errand for a parent. The lobby bustled with activity, providing ideal camouflage as Naruto wove through the crowd. A directory mounted on the wall confirmed what he suspected. Administrative records on the first floor. Archive access restricted to the sub-levels. A Tunin stood guard beside a stairway marked authorized personnel only, checking identification of those seeking entry to lower levels. Direct approach wouldn't work. Naruto needed a distraction. He positioned himself in a corner, observing the flow of traffic while pretending to organize papers from his portfolio. The guard maintained consistent vigilance, but his attention naturally followed movement, particularly when multiple people approached simultaneously. Opportunity presented itself when a haired L-looking woman entered carrying a towering stack of folders that obscured her vision. Naruto waited until she approached the guard station, then timed his move perfectly. As the woman fumbled for her identification while balancing her precarious load, Naruto slipped past the checkpoint, sliding into the stairwell with fluid grace that would have made his mother proud. Hard hammering against his ribs, he descended quickly but quietly. Footsteps muffled against stone steps that spiraled downward into dimming light. The air grew noticeably cooler, heavy with the scent of aged paper and preservation jutsu. At the bottom, another door awaited. This one reinforced with both physical locks and the telltale shimmer of security seals. A formidable barrier for most, but not for someone with fresh knowledge of Uzumaki Fu and Jutsu principles. Nar examined the seal array without touching it. Recognition flickered in his mind. The configuration resembled illustrations from his mother's second scroll, though considerably more complex. Designed to detect unauthorized chakra signatures attempting access. The seal would trigger an alarm if breached carelessly, but seals operated on rules. And rules could be understood. Circumvented, Naruto closed his eyes, recalling Kusha's guidance about chakra suppression, the precise opposite of the Academy's technique of projecting chakra for jutsu. Instead of releasing energy, he drew it inward, compressing his vast reserves into the tightest possible core within his center. When he opened his eyes, Naruto extended one finger toward the seal matrix. A minuscule amount of chakra, barely a whisper, gathered at its tip. With surgical precision, he traced a counter pattern alongside the existing array, not disrupting, but temporarily redirecting its function. For 3 breathless seconds, nothing happened. Then, with a soft click, the lock disengaged. Naruto pushed the door open just enough to slip through, finding himself in a cavernous chamber lined with shelves stretching from floor to ceiling. Thousands of scrolls, books, and document cases filled the space, organized in a system he couldn't immediately decipher. Glowing orbs mounted on walls provided soft, ambient illumination that wouldn't damage delicate materials. Whoa, he breathed, momentarily overwhelmed by the scale of the archives. Finding anything specific in this labyrinth would be nearly impossible. Without guidance, a sound from the far end of the chamber snapped Naruto back to alertness. He wasn't alone. Someone moved between distant shelves, the shuffle of footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. Nar ducked behind a nearby shelf, pulse racing. Discovery now would mean serious trouble far beyond the minor reprimands his pranks usually earned. Breaking into restricted government facilities carried real consequences, even for a child. But he'd come too far to retreat empty handed. His mother's next message waited somewhere in this underground repository of knowledge. Look beneath the obvious. Her clue had specified. Naruto's gaze swept the room, seeking anything that might qualify as beneath the obvious. His attention snagged on the central feature of the chamber. A massive stone table surrounded by study areas apparently designed for archivists to examine. Documents ornately carved from a single slab of granite. Its surface bore the unified symbol of Konoha beneath the obvious. Could it be that literal? Nar eyed the space beneath the stone table. From his position, something appeared to be attached to its underside. A dark shape that didn't match the table's natural contours. The unknown archivist's footsteps grew louder, approaching his section of shelving. No time for caution. Nar launched into action, scurrying on all fours across the open space to the central table. Without hesitation, he squeezed underneath, pressing his back against the cold stone floor as he examined the table's underside. There, secured to the granite by what appeared to be a chakra adhesive seal, hung a small scroll wrapped in the familiar crimson fabric with the Uzumaki spiral. His heart performed a victorious somersault. Found it. The archivist's feet appeared at the edge of Naruto's vision. Standard issue shinobi sandals moving with purpose along the table's perimeter. Breath frozen in his lungs. Naruto remained motionless, willing himself to blend with the shadows beneath the massive stone slab. Eternity compressed into seconds as the feet paused directly beside his hiding place. A folder thudded onto the table's surface above him. Papers rustled. Then mercifully, the feet moved away, retreating toward a different section of shelving. Naruto exhaled silently, then focused on his prize. The scroll was affixed with a simple but elegant seal, one that would release with application of the correct chakra signature. He reached up, fingers trembling slightly as he pressed them against the seal and channeled the smallest possible pulse of Uzumaki chakra. The adhesive released instantly, dropping the scroll directly into his waiting palm with barely a whisper of sound. Mission accomplished. Now came the equally challenging extraction. Nar tucked the precious scroll into his inner pocket, then peered out from beneath the table. The archivist had disappeared among distant shelves, giving him a narrow window of opportunity. With practice stealth born from years of escaping after pranks, Naruto slithered from his hiding place and crept back toward the entrance. The return journey through the restricted door, up the spiral staircase, and past the guard station required all his accumulated cunning. Nar employed every trick he developed for post-prank escapes, timing movements to coincide with distractions, utilizing blind spots, projecting an aura of belonging rather than furtiveness. When he finally emerged from the Hokage Tower into the bright morning sunshine, the release of tension nearly buckled his knees. He'd done it. He'd successfully infiltrated one of Konoha's most secure facilities and escaped undetected. With his mother's fifth scroll safely tucked against his racing heart, triumph surged through Naruto's veins as he merged with pedestrian traffic, gradually increasing distance between himself and potential pursuers. The weight of the scroll against his ribs felt simultaneously substantial and ethereal. Another tangible link to his mother. Another piece of the puzzle she'd constructed for him. Only when he'd put several blocks between himself and the tower did Nar check the time. Nearly noon. The academy day was half over. Returning now would draw more attention than simply being absent. Besides, what could I-sensei possibly teach him today that would compare to successfully circumventing archives security? More pressing concerns occupied his mind, namely his promised training session with Hinata. After yesterday's breakthrough, he couldn't disappoint her by failing to appear. But the newly acquired scroll burned in his pocket, demanding immediate attention. Naruto found Compromise at the edge of a small public park. Concealed by bushes, but still within village boundaries, he carefully extracted the scroll, hands trembling with anticipation. As he untied the binding cord, the familiar handwriting flowed across the parchment. My brave, resourceful Naruto, if you're reading this, you've demonstrated remarkable ingenuity and determination. The archives are not easily accessed, especially by an academy student. Your mother couldn't be prouder of your growing skills. This scroll contains knowledge I debated, including it all information about our clan's history that some in Konoha might prefer remains buried. I've sealed this particular message with additional protections that will render it unreadable to anyone lacking Uzumaki blood. The Uzumaki clan was not merely allied with Konoha. We were instrumental in its founding. When Hashimurama Sinu and Madara Akiya created this village, Uzushiakir provided essential support through our sealing expertise. The very barriers that protected early Konoha were Utsuaki creations. More personally relevant, the wife of the first Hokage was Mito Uzumaki, your distant relative. This blood connection between Sinu and Uzumaki cemented the alliance between our villages. When Ujio fell during the war, Konoha absorbed many surviving Uzumaki, though few maintained the name openly due to political complications. I came to Konoha as a young girl, the last princess of a fallen nation, to fulfill a special role that I cannot fully explain in these scrolls. What matters is that despite our clan's virtual extinction, our legacy lives on, both in a symbol adorning Konoha's buildings and uniforms, and in you, my son. The techniques in this scroll focus on our clan's most distinctive ability, chakra chains. Few Uzumaki could manifest these constructs, but those who did became legendary for their capability to bind even the most powerful entities. The training is grueling, and manifestation may not occur until your